Hi everyone, my name is Carolina Bertini from WhatWap and welcome to Mobile Perspective, Mobile Marketing in 2020 and beyond. We have a great webinar ahead of us today, and over the next 60 minutes, you will hear speakers from 7 different companies giving you their views on how mobile marketing has changed over the course of 2020 and how it will progress in 2021. The first 20 minutes are dedicated to our webinar hosts from Adjust, REPLUG, Snap, and ironSource. And during the second half, I will be joining General Games and Runtastic to chat a little bit about our strategies and predictions. So to kick things off, I would like to hand over to our first panelist to welcome everybody. And please introduce yourself and your company for anyone who doesn't know you or your position. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start. Hello, everyone. My name is Juanjo. I'm head of sales for Southern Europe and Benelux at Adjust.
Hi, Juanjo.
So please go ahead. Ladies first.
Hi, I'm Tarika Soni. I manage Europe for gaming at Snapchat.
Hi, everyone. I'm Luca, and I'm the co-founder of the REPLUG, a mobile app marketing consulting agency.
Okay. Okay.
Hi guys.
I think you're on mute.
Yeah, Yevgeny.
Can you hear me? Cool.
Yeah, sure, perfectly.
VP of Growth at ironSource, mostly oversee our product strategy. Very happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you guys for being here. So let's jump right in. So my first question is, what have been your key findings, learnings, your observation from 2020? Who wants to go first?
Okay, so we're going to start here. So I think like 2020 will be remembered in the mobile app history for 2 major things, pretty much the pandemic and iOS 14. From the pandemic side, we have some, major observations since we are, like a middle point for everyone. So gyms and fitness studios began closing in March. So after that, we start to see skyrocket with, I have some notes here, but like a 67% increase in the number of install and 48% increase in the number of sessions in May, so according to some Adjust data. So pretty much the same trend we saw on LTTs and books and productivity apps as well, on gaming as well. So install were more than double globally, app sessions also ballooned, and also developers would be able to find a very attractive CPI. On the other hand, on the countryside, on the mobile, travel and mobility app verticals, we saw pretty much a high reduction of the number of install between 50 and 65%, depending on the market, right? So that's our bigger observations regarding the pandemic, right? On the other hand, we need to talk a little bit on iOS 14, I guess, right? It's a bit more like I could define a kind of a messy situation because the new privacy standard Apple announced was not super clear since the very beginning, right? So actually, a lot of Adjust clients, but also competitors' clients came to us trying to understand the impact of this new policy, right? We are just like, we embrace Apple concerns about data privacy. I mean, we are okay that we need to make sure that we are privacy centric when we're talking about user data. But at the same time, we're here to serve our customers, right? So that's why we need to, we are also figuring out, and that's part of our biggest observation. We've been working so hard to balance this new privacy standard with the marketers' needs, right? So at the end of the day, it's like trying to understand what the market needs, and we've been working on that to make sure that we cover that need.
Okay, thank you, Juanjo. Let's proceed maybe with Tarika.
Yeah, so I would say completely aligned with what Adjust has to say, but more myopically from a Snapchat standpoint, I guess, because we're a specific platform and Adjust gets the whole view. But I think a few learnings, right, from 2020, which you wouldn't have anticipated at all, is I'd say the one thing that I've learned, and so has Snap in general, is learning to be flexible and adapt your business drastically in a dynamically changing environment. I mean, it was really interesting to actually see the graphs of where the uptick, and we saw 3 pillars in Snapchat from an uptick standpoint during COVID. And you could actually see from the graphs, right, like based on the government laws, wherever there was a lockdown, the engagement ratios grew. And it was really interesting to see the time spent in Snapchat, which is typically about 30 minutes, started exceeding. You would see voice being used much more, video being used a lot more. We saw, in general, we have about 66% of Snapchatters that started using mobile games and were playing a lot more. So I agree with you. I think most people on this panel especially would know that gaming has been the Cupid of COVID. And we definitely have seen that, not just in terms of a boom in general on the advertising side, but even as Snap Games itself, we have over 100 million daily active users now that are using Snap Games, which we did not expect, considering we actually just built Snap Games in April 2019. So this is probably carved out for much later, but it happened a lot quicker and drastic change, right? I think from a learning standpoint also, I'd say in the start of the COVID environment, we realized, leading with an empathy message, and a lot of advertisers had chosen not to message. And we saw on Snapchat, like messaging and creating brand love for any advertiser was important. Leading with empathy was even more important, and not sounding opportunistic at the same time. So I think that's a big learning in general is, yes, certain verticals are growing, like I just mentioned as well. Certain did not. So there's no reason for you to sound opportunistic when talking to your users. And I think that's one of the other key learnings. And I think one other thing to point out is potentially it's important when businesses are pivoting to address the user's actual reality. If people are actually sitting on their couches, say so. Say like, play with your work from home buddy. And it's important to address that you understand and you've moved on with time, instead of not acknowledging at the same time, but then you can't sound very negative either. So I think there've been a lot of learnings in general from a digital mobile app space, because the time spent on your phones went up, and you have to be a lot more respectful in terms of mind share of keeping your creative very automated and unique, because there is such a flood of information when everyone's on their devices all the time, that you have to be really mindful of how you're capturing their mind share. And then obviously, I think moving into considering iOS 14 has now shifted, I think the industry eventually will need to start looking into being more probabilistic than deterministic in general, obviously.
Okay, thank you very much, Tarika. And what about Luca?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I can only agree with what Adjust and Snapchat said, but I think one key learning is that we can say we've learned, at least at REPLUG, and also with the partners that we work with, is that we need to plan to be flexible. It seems a little bit of an odd statement, but this means like all the plans that we made in 2019 obviously went legs up when the pandemic happened. We've seen with some of the partners that we work with that they had to completely reinvent the business model. I mean, we had some partners in the mobility business that went from one day to the other almost, completely blocked in terms of activities. And they had to reinvent the way they saw the opportunity in terms of business, because otherwise they would have lost everything. And we've seen a lot of companies also in the digital space that actually suffered because of the pandemic, right? On the other hand, we also had some partners that actually benefit in a way from the lockdown, because they worked in the e-commerce delivery space, and they saw like a huge spike of orders, users, and data. And on the other hand, again, they planned probably a very different growth, and then they found themselves with thousands of data they didn't know how to analyze. So we kind of sat next to them and try to understand what's the best approach, to be flexible enough to actually look into, because let's be honest, I mean, COVID is not going to pass. I mean, it's not like it's passing on lockdown, it's over and then we're all happy and now everything is finished. Absolutely not. And then I think, on top of that, I mean, the iOS 14 is, it's just another challenge that goes and add to it. I think that in terms of so far learnings, I think we don't have so many learnings from an agency perspective. We're still trying to understand Apple's view and what they actually want to enforce. So as of today, what we do, we just basically, the biggest learning is like talk with people, try to understand what other important players are doing, like Adjust, like Snapchat, like ironSource, of course. And then sit next to the clients and try to help them navigate this situation. This is quite crazy.
Thank you very much, Luca. Evgeny, would you like to share your point?
Yeah, 2020 was and still is a very interesting year for sure. With ironSource, I think what's interesting is seeing our technology, how it behaves during the pandemic and afterwards. You think about the numbers. Our technology, our SDK, is embedded into most of the top apps in the charts, mostly in games, and the technology that is kind of providing that that growth engine witnessed an interesting change in the behavior of users. I'd say, I think it was interesting to learn, I think, for all of us, the resilience of, and in general, the greater part gaming is taking in players, people's entertainment lives in terms of consuming content and entertainment. During the pandemic, it was really interesting to see as it started, the difference between how the difference between a weekend day and a weekday looks like in the data was very interesting, and how it behaved differently between the different countries as they went into lockdown and different as different measures were taken. And I think in general, that was in terms of the user behavior, in terms of consuming content and entertainment. But there was also a very big shift in how each app is being utilized. There's a lot of growth from specific categories. There was a slowdown in some, and how that is connected into user acquisition. How am I engaging with a certain user now that is, in many cases, playing a game, and how do I take his focus into entertaining, introducing a new value add. And I think that throughout the year, as things changed in terms of user behavior and the marketing methodologies, once iOS 14 was introduced, I think it was very interesting to witness how the market in general is sharing information and educating each other and trying to achieve some sort of standardization. I think that was very interesting, not only in terms of adapting with the new technical challenges. I think it's also was interesting to see how a lot of relationships grew stronger between the different partners, different people within the industry, to facilitate that conversation around what will 2021 look like in the future, and also in developing new methodologies on how to embrace this change and turn this into a big opportunity for each in its own business. I think that was definitely interesting. Not to mention things like, the others mentioned, Tarika, mostly around how the company is now needs to be built and operate in this new era, which was very interesting to participate in.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a second question for you all, and it's more about 2021. So how are you preparing for next year? What are the changes you are implementing and the trends you are expecting? We can switch again to Juanjo.
Yeah, sure. So, well, I would like to say something different, but we still will be able to see some lockdown. So the pandemic, as Luca mentioned before, won't be over. So on that perspective, we prefer to see the good phase. And we definitely expect next year to, all verticals like to be back to normal business, including, of course, traveling and mobility verticals, who probably has been the one that suffered the most. Also, we think that due to that back to normal business, there will be a lot of focus on retargeting and re-engagement. Like that would be a major focus. A publisher will make sure that to bring all those good users back to their apps. On the iOS 14, I mean, it's difficult to say something for sure. We will keep working to support our clients to meet their needs. In that sense, I think we here in Adjust there are three major things that we see. One is start thinking about implementing ad transparency tracking framework. Okay, so publisher needs now and will need in the future to test and research about the optimal consent flow for the apps. And that's something that they need to consider now. And we just have started our own research program with the help of our UX, UA team to help our client to implement the best consent flows that fits their apps. Also in our new SDK, so we will be able to automatically track the user's opt-in status. So we will be able to let the client know about if it's authorized, denied, not determined, or restricted. And definitely that will help clients to optimize these opt-ins as a conversion event. On the other hand, so on the second step, we will keep supporting SK and network. We see that more like a secondary aggregated data pipeline for advertisers, because this solution so far still have some limitations in the way we see. So there's no user level identification, or Apple only verifies to the install but not the post event. So we will still support it, definitely. We recently launched Adjust Data Studio, which is now in beta. And this will allow clients to visualize all its SK and networks data. Okay, so they just need to select some widgets to build customizable charts, and that's it. And then the third thing that we see with 2021, that's something that Eugene talked, is provoking thoughts and conversation. That's definitely something that we will love to keep doing about what's the best way to approach these iOS 14 changes. Of course, we invite everyone to join the discussion, but yeah, that's the way we see, like the kind of things that we're working now, the kind of things that we're seeing for 2021. Of course, I agree with you all that flexible is the word of the year, probably. So we need to keep being flexible.
Yeah, we will need to adapt to new conditions for sure. Tarika, do you want to add your point of view?
Yeah, I'll add two more things. I think for 21, I think the trends that we're seeing in 2020 first will carry on into 21. I don't see a drastic change in our behavior. And I think these behaviors of video, communication, just talking more with your friends, when you're physically apart, or, the gaming behavior that we've inbuilt are habits now. I don't think they're short-term behaviors. I think they'll linger into 21. And I think keeping that in mind, there are very interesting trends that we've picked up on, where 21 is where Snap will continue to invest in things like gaming, right? Knowing despite the changes that iOS 14 will bring, we expect obviously a lot of, test and learn will carry on the Android side to implement on the iOS side. So that's one way of thinking about 21, at least in the initial phases. And then I think from a gaming side, what we notice very clearly is the need for live streaming, chat, and voice functionality with multiplayers. I think that was a very obvious trend. When you're physically apart, it was important for Snapchatters or gamers in general to want to feel like they're in the same room with their friends on their couch, talking to each other. So I think that live streaming piece is an interesting one to look through, and building communication within the apps in some fashion. I think that's a very big trend that is going to continue in 21. But I think, like everyone agrees here, flexibility, learning, testing will continue into 21 as we grow into what Apple has to offer.
Thank you, Tarika, for your insights. Then Luca?
Yeah, I mean, 2021, I think I have to just follow what everybody else says. So flexibility obviously is going to be key, also from our perspective as an agency. Like, we cannot just approach things the old way. I don't think, as I said, and as everybody said, that 2020, so what happened in 2020 just ends on December. It will definitely keep happening, or at least will have an impact on what will be 2021. And also believe that this is the new normality, right? So as Tarika was saying, so this new way of communication, this new way of talking with clients, users. And I think, I mean, I can spot already, of course, let's say a couple of trends, so to say, for 2021. One in regards to COVID, for example. So there will be the type of users that we, or our partners in this case, have acquired during this period, and we keep acquiring in the next few months. Obviously, a lockdown situation is not the usual thing. So for this reason, we see that user will behave in a different way. And for this, we need to be careful how we communicate with them. So how we make sure that when things will be over, hopefully soon, we can engage with them. So what we do with our partners, we basically try to also think about reinventing the communication strategy from a CRM perspective as well. Then the other thing, of course, is iOS 14. That's it's going to be an interesting one for 2021. As Juanjo said, the privacy framework is going to be the biggest thing. I mean, we see that a lot of developers still not clear what they have to do, how this works. And we are taking the role of trying to figure things out for them. Because from a technical perspective, yes, it's a lot of integration, of course. All the providers are giving new SDKs updates and so on and so forth. But from a business perspective, from a marketing perspective, there will be massive, massive repercussions. Also because we cannot just say, okay, iOS, we just move everything to Android. That doesn't really work. So I think that's going to be very interesting from that perspective. And we see already some impact with iOS 14 from the in the App Store, for example, how the App Store looks. So App Store optimization will also play a big role. And again, I think since September, a couple of weeks, we did the update of the iOS 14. And no one really, I mean, at least the people that we talked with, our partners, no one really noticed this change, and they didn't find out that now if you're in the top 2, top 3, your app is now showing up in the first screen that the user sees in the store. So that's something that obviously we are keeping in consideration, and will take a bigger chunk of attention from everybody, I believe.
Thank you, Luca, for this insight actually on SEO. It's really interesting. It's something that, talking about iOS 14, nobody really thinks about because we are all focused on privacy. So a good point. And Yevgeny, what about your point?
Yeah, I think that all great points so far. I think assuming 2021 will be the year of the iOS 14 implications around the tracking transparency framework, assuming there's no more surprises coming in for us, I think that there's going to be a big difference between apps that rely heavily on user acquisition versus those that rely on a strong brand, a strong IP, and the way these apps, these businesses will look like, I think once the changes are here will look different. I think that will impact how the pie will be distributed. So the pie will look differently once the changes are here. If you look at the top charts now versus a year from now, my prediction is that there's going to be a change. In general, it's going to be the difference between these two types of apps, but within those that rely heavily on user acquisition, I think those that will embrace the change faster and smarter and will use this as an advantage versus other in this ecosystem, I think they will come out actually stronger, and their business will happen to grow if they implement changes properly. And I think this is what at least most of the time that we are spending now is sharing our findings with the partners, with the developers that we're working with the advertisers, and even if it's sharing what we've learned so far from our integration with the network, if it's partnering with companies like Adjust on integrating and making and facilitating everything possible for the advertisers to build their models on, so their businesses will be able to grow in 2021. I think that's kind of the riddle that we're facing in 2021. But I'm optimistic personally that this is a big opportunity for the developers that will act fastly and embrace this change quicker.
Okay. Thank you, Evgeny, and thank you so much, everyone. I will now pass on Lorenzo.
Hi guys, can you hear me, Caro?
Yes, sure.
Perfect. So, hi everyone, and welcome again to Mobile Perspective. My name is Lorenzo, and I am the other face of REPLUG. You already met Luca, and now you're meeting me. That I will guide this second session, this second panel, where we will be able to listen to another point of view, the point of view of the advertiser, of the clients. And today we want to do something a bit different from the other webinars, because usually we have a, let's say, we have a program, but today we want instead to ask you guys, what do you want us to talk about? So you will see a poll now, and why I will introduce the speakers and they will introduce themselves. You can have the opportunity to answer, and then we will start the conversation based on your preferences. So let's start again from Carolina. I mean, you met her and she was perfectly introducing the other panel. And then we have another Italian guy, Luca, that is the head of product marketing for Adidas Fantastic. Hi, Luca. I don't see.
Lorenzo.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi. And then we have Luis. Luis is the Chief Marketing Officer of General Games. So guys, I leave you two if you want to say a couple of words about yourself in the meantime that we are waiting for the results.
Luca?
I can start. Thank you, Lorenzo, and thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm Luca, and as Lorenzo already teased, I'm the head of product marketing for Adidas Running. What does it mean? It means that I'm in charge of like the growth squad for the flagship app of Adidas Fantastic. You may know Adidas Running as called Runtastic. We rebranded last year. We count around 160 million of registered users throughout our 10 years worth of activity. And my personal experience as in this position, I started actually this year, but before I was working in user acquisition, app store optimization, and a few other product marketing roles across different continents in the last 5 years, something like that. So yeah, I'm, let's say, not super new, not super aged into the mobile marketing world like Lorenzo, for example.
Yeah. Hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. So yeah, I'm Luis, and I'm the CMO at Genera Games. Genera Games is a studio, development studio, and I'm a publisher and based in south of Spain. We've been in gaming for a while thanks to Frozen Freefall, which we developed for before for Disney, but today for Jam City. And we launched about 7 months ago a match 3 narrative decoration game called Tuscany Villa, which is doing really well. And we have a whole bunch of other games in different genres as well. And I myself am leading the marketing strategy in there. I've been in the games industry for about 15 years, working first in console gaming and now since 2013 in mobile games and companies like Gameloft, King, Outplay, etc. So really excited to speak to everyone here.
Luis, I'm sorry, you need to be in a panel with 3 Italians.
It's
I
great.
promise you we will not go too long with our talks. Anyhow, guys, Carolina, you want to say something about yourself, or?
Yes, just I work in WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is one of the leading mobile gaming companies in Italy. Our mission is to bring traditional fun to mobile, and my job is simply to reach everyone who loves evergreen games. I started my career in digital marketing in a totally different sector, the online recruiting sector. And in 2019, I joined WhatsApp, and now my role is to define the strategy for both paid and organic acquisition for our games.
Thank you, guys. So I don't know if you had the opportunity to see the results of the polls. I had, and unfortunately, the first topic is iOS 14. I know, guys, that it's a big topic. I know that everyone is talking about that, and we need to talk about that as well. So I will start just with a general question. What are your feelings? Are you prepared? Are you preparing? Carolina?
Okay, so I'll start, and I have to say we are working on it. Actually, we have set up a task force made of producers, tech experts, our senior developers, our platform people, to like create a roadmap about what we have to do, from SDKs updates, from decision about how we will ask users to give us their permission to track them, and so on. So far, we are very happy that iOS has decided to move on 2021, the second part, the more privacy-related part of this iOS 14, and we are doing our best to be really prepared. So let's say so and so.
Luca or Luis, what do you think, Luca?
Well, I just seen some results of the poll, and I'm really jealous of the person that actually replied 10. So bravi, I'm really happy for you. We are definitely not at that spot yet. We are actually, let's say, when the first news come out, we were totally not even really realizing the implication, and then suddenly, boom, exploded in our mind. We set up a core team for actually just following the news and what the big players were doing in the industry. And then we realized a bit too late that we couldn't have made it, just to be super honest. And we would have rushed a lot to get into the deadline of the iOS 14 release if the IDFA topic would have stayed. But luckily, this was postponed, and right now we are actually planning way better. So in a certain sense, this gave us a bit of breathing time, and we will use a bit of incremental experiments and so on toward the end of the year in order to really try to keep up and understand the behavior of users. Also gonna definitely await for some answers from, let's say, Facebook, Google, and so on, or from Facebook, especially how this is gonna behave, I would say. So.
Yeah. So it's great that you guys are sort of taking that approach. I think for us, we've sort of decided to take a slightly different approach. We are kind of more in the wait and see camp. We've been basically, we really want to make sure we're not getting too distracted and try to manage as much as we can, and take advantage as much as we can the current situation and how things are going. And that extra window has been very helpful for sure. I think I have someone on my team fully focused on really trying to pull in as much information from different sources as possible. And there's a lot of experimentation happening and so forth. So we're sort of in the camp of let's try to lean on what other people are discovering rather than us going straight out and doing all the tests. And then once they're, because webinars like these and obviously podcasts and blogs and, there's a whole bunch of different people who are focused right now on doing a whole bunch of experimentation and testing, speaking to different partners and so forth. And from that's what we're trying to do is pull as much information as we can from there, see what other people are learning, and then based on some of those learnings and those results, we'll start setting up our own sort of experimentation or sort of own tests on how we want to do stuff. And with specific partners, whether they're UA partners or data analytics partners or so forth, when they have specific experiments in mind, we'll be open to exploring those options as long as it's not more too disruptive to what we're currently doing, which is just trying to scale Tuscany Villa, which is kind of our core focus right now. But yeah, we're definitely here on leaning on others and seeing what they discover before we kind of go full in on our side.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, guys. And since you mentioned that you are reading, you are seeing podcast, you are listening to podcasts, you are watching webinars, what is for you guys, and I've seen also there is a poll about that, what is for you the source of truth in these uncertain times? So who do you trust? You go to your MMP, or you go to the website, you do your own research, you have someone inside the company?
If I can go first, I would say a mix of everything, both personal research, both our MMP, and some exchange and some confront with other marketing manager in the field, the thing is that I have this feeling that there is no full picture yet. So the hardest job here is to put on a list and say, okay, we have to do A, B, C, D. This is the hardest thing, I think. And then all the implication, because at a certain moment you want to be ready for the change. So the thing is, I think the best idea is to read and see what somebody else is doing, test they're trying, and so on. So I think that for us, it's working quite well to be informed on all the possible sources we can have.
Understood. Understood. You have some different point of view, Luca? Are you using some different sources?
Completely aligned here. Let's say that we are trying to ping a bit other people in the industry. So basically, really people that we know working in other companies and so on, and trying to check different approaches. But at the same time, also our MMP is actually a very good source of information, because in some way it's trying to get the best out of different big players up in the industry, which is great. And then we are also trying the direct way. So in some ways, we are also trying to push on one side our Apple contacts, and on the other side maybe some other big players contacts, to really give us some hint of what they are trying to do, because in the end this will and actually we didn't succeed that much, but in this way we can really try to leverage also how we forecast for next year, for in terms of budget, in terms of like effort and acquisition perspectives. So
Yeah. I don't know if Luis, you have something to add, or?
Not really. I mean, basically everything they've said, this is exactly what we're doing as well. So yeah.
Yeah, makes sense, guys. Makes sense. And before to continue with some other question, I want to remind something to the audience. If you guys have some questions for our panelists, please feel free to ask in the Q&A box, and we will answer right away. And before to move on to the other topics that we wanted to talk about today, just to close with iOS 14, what is the thing that we understood that there is nothing certain to do, but if you want to say something, I don't know, being incrementality test, being a budget switch to Android, or some growth hacking, what is the thing that you suggest to do, or that you believe is the best thing to do at the moment?
Yeah. So for me, I would say it's a little bit of everything. I would say try to do some experiments with incrementality. Try to find a partner that's an expert on that. I know guys at MetricWorks are looking into that quite a bit, and there's a whole bunch of other people who are looking into that. So that's, I would say is like, look at what are the main sort of trends you're from kind of doing that research with blogs and podcasts and etc., webinars and so forth, and then speaking to colleagues within the industry. Look at what are the different trends there are. Incrementality is one of them. SKAd network itself, trying to figure out what you can do with SKAd network. Speak to your partners such as Facebook and Google, and how they're going to be using SKAd network and so forth. So I would say in those two areas, really explore what can be done on that side, and then start looking a little bit more outside the box as well. It's like, what does marketing doesn't necessarily need, or user acquisition might not be exactly the same going forward. And even if there's ways to use IDFA, whatever IDFA you collect in the short term, it doesn't mean that in the long term, Apple might not just one day and say, IDFA is going away completely, right? So I think in a way you need to sort of start thinking about, what does it look like a world where there is zero IDFA, and where you can't do one-to-one sort of attribution, and then start thinking of other areas to explore. So I think looking at, as you said, maybe growth hacking, I would say even more just branding and finding other ways to really grow, looking at growth differently, right? I know some of the bigger brands and bigger publishers are definitely looking at growth, not just through UA, but what other ways do they have to kind of grow their IPs, and make, one thing has always been working with big licensors. But beyond that, you know, if you have your own IP, how do you kind of turn your IP into more of evergreen IP and so forth? And what kind of activity and actions and kind of more classical marketing can you do to build that? So that's probably another kind of avenue to explore in the future as well. Which I would say is that, you know, for the really hardcore performance marketing guys, it might be worrisome, but for a lot of us, I think, who have sort of had to adapt to performance marketing over the years, it's almost like a blessing in disguise that we kind of get an excuse to kind of go back to more of the classic strategies that we probably wanted to do earlier when we got into marketing in the first place.
It's an interesting point of view, yours. Like the pure performance marketing guys will be a bit like, oh, what are we doing? Huh? But the guys who have a bigger perspective can adapt, actually, indeed. Luca, Carolina, what about you?
I completely agree here with Luis. I will just generally add a couple of mid-term questions that you can ask yourself. The first one is if you are between 1 and 5 of the votation, so like you are totally not prepared or sort of middle prepared, and you are aiming to not be super prepared, maybe you can even really consider where you are actually spending your budget during the first part of this change incoming. And then you can ask yourself even a bigger question here, that is like part of what Luis was saying, like, do I really need in the very end the IDFA, or I can actually figure it out other ways? That's actually a question that we have the freedom in some ways, fantastic, to ask ourselves, because we are not having a big brand behind us like the Adidas can actually make us think on the bigger picture in terms of like the type of products that we're selling is not only fantastic, but it's like some shoes that you may see somewhere on you or around you or like the power of the brand is really big. So that's the type of question that it may get you to the point where you are gonna try to adapt to this big change. Because I totally agree with Luis. We need to also prepare for the possibility of a world without the IDFA. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and as well with Luis, because we have to think out of the box. But I would like to add just a small point. All this focus now on the user's privacy, starting from GDPR some years ago and so on, it's really important. It's really important, and I think that users have to know what we are using their data for. But at the same time, I think there is a lot of evil behind the people who is using this data. And from my point of view, I am a marketer, so I know it doesn't count, but I feel good when I see a good and interesting advertising for me. So I prefer to see a useful advertising rather than a totally unuseful one. So I think that we should also try to explain what we do and why we do that. It's just changing a little bit the perspective, because today we are giving for sure that people, if we ask them to give us permission, will say no. And we have to think about that, why people say no, because maybe we have done wrong in the past years, in the past months. So I think we should also look at this side of the picture.
So it's a problem of educating the people to
Exactly.
why they are seeing your advertising and why it's good for them. And I think it's a big responsibility also for us, that we need to educate our colleagues and the industry to make a good usage of the IDFAs and the tracking things. So we have a couple of questions. I'm gonna just answer or ask you guys. The first one that is saying, from Caroline, sorry. What are your thoughts on measuring and attributing retention in an iOS 14 world, especially keeping in mind that some networks are trying to claim the scan conversions value for themselves? So this is a problem more of retention and networks that are trying to claim the attribution. I don't know.
Well, one thing around retention, I think CRM and retention, at least when it comes to inside your product or inside your product portfolio, in the short term should not be affected in any way, as in terms of the measurement aspect. Because one thing that I don't know if everyone's clear about, but there's even the one thing's IDFA, which allows you to kind of connect user behavior across different apps that are not part of your portfolio, but that there's still the IDFV that exists, which allow you to continue to measure your users within your game or within your studio, your game development, or sorry, I'm talking about games, but sorry, apps. Sorry, that's just my vertical, but specifically apps in general, mobile apps. And with IDFE, if you have various apps, you'll still be able to track behavior across those different apps, as long as they're fully owned by yourself, by the company. And so I think the idea of being able to measure retention or engagement, cross promotion, spend behavior, et cetera, all that will still be completely feasible through IDFE. It's just that what you won't be able to do so easily is attribute a lot of that behavior to specific marketing campaigns or from a specific from a specific source that they came from another app that's outside your own sort of portfolio.
Thanks, Luis. Actually, we will talk a bit about retention again in the next topic. I see there are other questions. We need to talk also about the other things, but we will send those questions privately to our panelists so they will be able to answer. Because now I don't want to be too German, but we need to talk also about the other three topics. And basically, we need to talk about the other main happening, the other main drama that we had in 2020, that it's not iOS 14, but it's the COVID, the pandemic, that for us marketers and user acquisition managers was a big tragedy or not. That's something that you guys have to tell me. And we start talking about the costs. What you have seen during 2020, I think, in my opinion, that we can divide 2020 and this pandemic thing in three main phases. The first one is the pure lockdown, when everyone was at home. The second one was the post-lockdown, when everyone basically wanted to go out and they were never at home. And then there is now, so the new normality. What did you see, guys, in these three phases during the pandemic in terms of costs? Luis, you.
Yeah, so we launched our game Tuscany Villa, which has been in development for 2 years, and those 2 years include soft launch and so forth. We actually launched at the end of March, the very beginning of April, and so basically, in at least for what Europe and the United States is in the absolute core beginning of the lockdown, and actually that in a way actually helped us, I think, with launching the product. We saw CPMs be quite cheap. It's hard for us to kind of separate what was golden cohort versus what was the actual just the cost of acquisition and the competition at the time. But speaking to Facebook, Google, etc., they did say when they were doing retrospectives that we did get better pricing because of the fact that there were tourism apps, restaurant companies, fashion, etc., that had really pulled spend during that period because it was very uncertain if they would be able to convert that into actual monetization and to ROAS. And so I think we were lucky to sort of have that window. And obviously for gaming specifically, people being closed indoors, a lot of people turned into gaming, and actually gaming generally right now is a bit on fire. I mean, you hear about these crazy investments happening all over the place within gaming, and I think people are realizing that gaming is one of these best types of entertainment, especially for every dollar spent. You really get a lot out of that. And so I think we were very much, I think specifically in gaming, it's been not bad for us, actually quite the opposite. I think when people started to come out of the more hardcore lockdowns, then we started to see pricing come up. But that's from our perspective. I don't know if Carolina or Luca have seen similar trends or not.
Yeah, maybe I'll ask Carolina, since she's working in the same industry, and then we.
Yeah. Okay. Well, during the strict lockdown, since we have 2 games really focused on the Italian market, and since Italy was the first country actually to have a strong lockdown, it was the moment when we saw the lowest prices, and that's moment also when we decided to invest a lot, because we felt it was the right thing to do at the moment. But after, I would say that the things started to change around May, I would say, something like that, for all the metrics. We will talk about that later, but focusing on this, on CPI, it started changing in May, and it started increasing. But now I feel it's increasing more, and I believe that the next phase, the new normal, will be even more competitive, because lockdown and mainly lockdown have made a lot of companies, not only the classical digital companies, realize that digital marketing is really important. Just think about supermarkets, bars, restaurants, who have to communicate with their audience and tell them we are open, our place is safe, supermarkets that has to make their deliveries and so on. So the competition has raised not only across the original competitors we had, but also from new people. And I think that it will be the new normal, because now people is getting used to see on the internet what they are looking for. So this is the feeling I have for the next few months. And also I've read some reports from, the main channels, Google, Facebook, and they are all telling retailers to be ready for the Christmas season in advance, because they really need to prepare their users, because they will make their first before to buy decision on the internet, because they will be probably afraid of crowded places indoor. So that's the reason why I believe this fall winter season will be even more competitive than we are used to.
Facebook is going to be crazy for Christmas in terms of prices. Luca, what do you think?
On our side, it was actually pretty interesting, because we do have two apps, and one app is actually for training indoor, and the other app is actually for made of training outdoor, so running and so on. So both of them work complementarily. So you can imagine that having also kind of the same audience that actually the travel industry has, and at the same time all the travel advertisers pulling off and remaining quite off during especially the a couple of months, and also right now just restarting, has set us for like quite some competition only within our health and fitness segment. So we have seen that our general prices went down. So like our cost went really down. CPM were actually pretty low compared to the seasonality that we were experiencing. And just shifting the budget from one app to the other worked actually super well, according to the type of lockdown that it was, like lockdown or everybody outside. And now we are experiencing this again, because being in the core market that it's mostly around the Northern Hemisphere, we are experiencing seasonality increased, because actually seasonality here doesn't mean only winter, it means also a rising in COVID cases, unfortunately. And this will get back to the Adidas training app, so the indoor training app, and a cheap way of actually getting there. We can see also the Christmas period as a still quite expensive, but most probably slightly less expensive than the last years on our health and fitness side, just because most probably, especially if the travel industry doesn't recover and doesn't go crazy as it usually does, we may really find some more space to our target audience. However, here it's also true what the e-commerce part is actually doing. The e-commerce will just go as crazy as it can get this year. So doubling down on the 2019 results, I think. Personal opinion.
It's a good point. Like it's an interesting point, and I share your point of view. I was thinking while you were speaking, you guys were pretty lucky, because like you're working the gaming industry, fitness industry. I would have liked to have someone from the travel industry today and ask them their opinion about costs or retention. And actually retention, it's the next topic regarding COVID. and pandemic. So those users that you guys acquired during the real lockdown, so during the phase where everyone was at home, how are they behaving today? Are they different? Are they normal users? How different? So do you see any differences from the users that you had before pre-COVID?
That's actually a great question. And unfortunately, yes, we do see differences because you can imagine we had tons of motivated people to actually train at home, all the gym closed across the whole world. So an uptake in organic install that was skyrocketing beyond incredible numbers and so on for both Adidas training between March and April and Adidas running after between May and June. And right now, all those users are actually what we call the averagely motivated users, which unfortunately, they do a couple of runs, a couple of trainings, and then poof, they disappear. So it's really true what was being said before. If I'm correct by Wando, is that next year, and also actually from this year, where we started to work on this since basically when we saw this coming in April and May, reactivation and retargeting is one of the most important topics in order to increase retention. I'm not talking about month 1, month 2 retention. I'm really talking about month 3, month 6, and month 12 retention. So those users will come back at a certain point, but we need to make sure that they actually stay in the loop and they don't go to a competitor or so on. So.
Interesting. Carolina, those users, are they still there?
Yeah, well, during lockdown, we had actually a very big spike in retention. We kind of help it because we made some special gifts, some special events for these users who had to spend their time at home. I can say that today retention is a bit lower. And I believe for two main reasons. If we think about summer, it's because once I had the chance to go out and stay outdoor, they didn't want to touch their phone. So I want to enjoy open air places and so on. And but what I think it's going to happen, it's that maybe people was very happy to stay outdoor, enjoying restaurants and so on during summer. But now that the temperature are falling down, winter is approaching, I believe that all these people will not feel so safe again to go in closed restaurants and indoor restaurants and bars. That's the reason why I think that we will have a new small peak in the next season. But I agree with both Juanjo and Luca that we really have to work on retention and re-engagement, especially considering this moment for these users that we had during lockdown. It could be really interesting to re-engage them and tell them, oh, look at what's new on our app.
And then we will see how you plan on engaging them. But first, Luis, your users that you acquired in March, let's say, where are they now? At the beach?
Yeah, well, obviously we have, we still need to kind of improve. I think we haven't seen anything really different because of COVID, specifically on user behavior. I think it's also true that our game is reasonably young, so we launched just then, and so we had obviously data from soft launch, but until we actually see cohorts mature, it's a bit hard to see. I mean, we haven't. I think from an early retention, we've always had a very, very strong game. And in that sense, we were very confident when we went to launch that we were going to get good results. And I think it surprised us even, that we at certain scale, we were still able to hit the same high, day 1 to day 7 retention numbers. We do see that we still need to kind of continue to improve our day 30, et cetera. And so that's sort of where a lot of our focus is. I think retention, generally speaking, when you launch a product, you obviously want to really start with those early retention numbers. But as you get more mature cohorts and as you get more kind of scale, you can then start and you feel confident about those early retention numbers. You need to start focusing on later retention numbers, and that's going to come with with more events, with more unique features, with making sure there's enough content to allow people to continue to engage. So yeah, nothing that we saw really notable from a COVID perspective. but generally speaking, I think we're pretty happy with the retention of our product. But always, you always have room for improvement and continue optimizing as a service-based business.
That's totally true. That's totally true, guys. We are already over time, but I got the permission to ask you another question. And the last question I want to ask is like a piece of advice for our audience, for the marketer, for the app marketers that tomorrow they want to start to re-engage those users. So just a little strategy that they can go tomorrow and say, okay, I'm going to do this in order to regain the trust of those users that acquire in February, March. Luis.
For me, it's re-engagement in general always is try to remind them why they enjoyed the experience in the first place, but then more importantly is what are you offering that's new and different and exciting for them to want to come back? What is that carrot or that real motivation? Tap into that motivation of why they want to come and interact with your app again. And humans love novelty. So the more you can kind of push the novelty factor and try to make it seem exciting. And then obviously if you have, gifts or rewards or discounts and things like that, depending on the vertical and the business, then, sometimes having a direct sort of response hook is always obviously a useful kind of, worm on the hook concept, right? But yeah, definitely novelty and then reminding them why they what that experience that they had in the past and how much they enjoyed it.
Yeah, being from the same industry, I would say I totally agree with Luis. I feel I just want to add a little bit of analysis on different cohorts, on different audiences of users we want to re-engage and understand why they drop. Maybe they just have another app and they've seen an ad on our app and they decided to change. So that's the downside. But at the same time, we want to understand if they run out of resources to play or something like that, it could be useful and could let us offer them what they really want. So if they finished all the levels or they are locked at a specific level, we can go directly to this specific pain point. But other than that, I totally agree with Luis.
Luca, I know what you guys are doing because I receive every day notification for challenge.
Oops, sorry.
That's very nice.
We may be the direct responsible of it, yes, especially my growth squad. So yeah.
I always see you.
Yeah, it happens. No, in any case, like that's actually what I would suggest because we do have less possibilities to offer rewards or gamification aspects than actually the gaming sector. So what we figured out that it worked quite well to try to engage the same cohort of users who got acquired during this period is to actually set up some campaigns or challenges or in general bringing novelty into some marketing with a purpose. So what we are doing right now, for example, is actually trying to run challenges toward the endangered species. And we see a very positive response from the people that were actually acquired occasionally, I would say, in those months. So I would say that's a kind of out of the box idea, but and it's also very difficult, I admit, to establish. We ran 2 campaigns with a purpose in the last 4 months, and this proved to be quite effective. Together with that, understanding the type of user is actually really important. So we understood what was the motivation behind the drop, and we tried to give them something. So
thank you, Luca, and thank you, everyone. Guys, they're making me virtual signals that I need to interrupt the panel because we are over time. And before to finish, just a couple of things. There are some unanswered questions, more than some, and we will send them directly to the panelists. And you should receive a recap of the event that is being recorded. And last, I would like to invite all the panelists, also from the previous sessions, to turn the camera on and to wave to the audience and to say goodbye. And it's been a pleasure, guys. I wish you a great evening and I hope you enjoyed the session.